Welcome to our celebration of women's suffrage. This is the second program in our election series. Before we start, I have a few things to go over to make the most of our time together. We are recording this call, so please keep your video cameras on and your microphone muted. Please stay muted until asked to speak or until the breakout rooms. You are able to control your microphone and camera with the icons at the lower left corner of your screen. You can also toggle back and forth between the gallery view and the speaker view using the upper right-hand corner icons. We prefer you use the speaker view, so go ahead and leave it in speaker view, but you can toggle back and forth if you want to see everybody. In celebrating with us today, we encourage you to use the chat feature to engage with the community. The chat is located in the lower middle of your viewing screen. Your chats can be sent individually or to everyone as a group. So share what you're thinking, things that are resonating with you, and let's start right now. Just chat in there where you're from. We'd love to hear from you. We have people from across the nation here today. So for those of you who are experiencing the Policy Circle for the first time, we are focused on building civic leaders. To achieve this, we have a number of programs, but our marquee program is volunteers convening and leading policy discussions based on the policy briefs and their discussion guides. These briefs are focused on facts, not politics, so everyone can determine the focus of their own impact. We have over 400 volunteers. We call them circle leaders. They are across this nation and in 4 countries. They bring these conversations to the local level in their businesses with colleagues, friends, families, and neighbors. If you want to build your civic leadership skills and you have the moxie to start the conversation, then you can reach out to me and I will help you get started. My information will be in the chat box. But now it's time to start the celebration. So I'd love to turn it over to one of our board members and the founder and host of She Said, which is a podcast that features women innovators, leaders, and trailblazers. Please welcome Laura Cox-Kaplan.
Judy, thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. I'm so happy to be here with all of you. She Said, and I are proud to serve as network partners for this event today. And I'm also, as Judy said, very proud to serve as a board member of the Policy Circle. If you all haven't had a chance, I'd be so grateful if you checked out She Said podcast. So many of our conversations are directly relevant to the types of conversations that we have in the Policy Circle, and it's all about women paying it forward and sharing what they've learned to help the rest of us. So the purpose of today's virtual event is to encourage you to take just a moment to reflect on the women who fought so tirelessly for more than 70 years to give women the right to vote. This event, of course, is entitled EqualiTEA, T-E-A, and that, of course, is a nod to the gatherings that suffragettes held that are not unlike Policy Circle meetings where women gather together in supportive environments to learn and to organize and to discuss their plans for taking action. So with that in mind, if you have a mug or a teacup or something nearby, please join me in raising it in honor of these amazing women trailblazers who really paved our path forward, and also to our continuation of their important work. So cheers to them and to all of you. Today, we're bringing you 3 distinct conversations that mirror the Policy Circle model for really diving in and understanding policy. But before I talk about those 3 conversations, I want to provide just a bit of historical context. The 19th Amendment, of course, was officially certified on August 26, 1920, 100 years ago tomorrow. Wyoming was the first state to cast its vote, with Tennessee casting the last vote needed for ratification on August the 18th. Now, recently on She Said podcast, in episode 113, I was honored to welcome Mary Morgan Ketchel and her mother, U.S. Senator Marsha Blackburn, who have penned a terrific children's book to commemorate the role that their home state of Tennessee played. The book is called Camilla Can Vote. Here's a copy. You can check out our conversation, and I hope that you will. It's episode 113 at SheSaidPodcast.com, and I've also included a link to their book, which you might like to take a look at as well, especially if you have little people in your life. It's really fantastic. The state of Indiana also played a very important role in the 19th Amendment in 1851, 3 years after the Seneca Falls Convention. Indiana became home to the oldest state-based women's suffrage organization. Policy Circle co-founders Angela Braley and Kathy Hubbard, who I'm happy to serve on this organization with. They're both Indiana natives, along with Policy Circle State Leadership Council co-chair Katie Glick, recently hosted the unveiling of a painting recounting Indiana's role in history of the suffrage movement. Now, in our first conversation, we're going to dig a little bit deeper into that history, and Katie will interview Leah Namias from the Indiana Humanities. That's a statewide nonprofit, and they're going to discuss the role that Indiana played in this important history. In our second conversation, we'll be exploring women in the media, a topic near and dear to my heart. In 1849, suffragette Amelia Bloomer became the first woman to own, operate, and edit a newspaper for women. It was called The Lily. By the way, she also is said to have introduced fellow suffragettes Elizabeth Cady Stanton to Susan B. Anthony. So there's incredible history there. Now, we've come a long way since those days, thankfully. Today, Circle leader Dee Dee Bass Wilbon, a partner at Bass Public Affairs and also a Circle leader, will talk with Amanda Becker, who is the Washington correspondent for the recently launched The 19th News. The name, of course, The 19th, is a nod to this important 100th anniversary, which I'm sure Amanda will talk a bit about today. In our final conversation, we'll focus on democracy in action and women in elected office. The Policy Circle co-founder, my friend Sylvie Legere, will be joined by former New Mexico Governor Susana Martinez, and they will discuss her journey into public office. Now, Governor Martinez, for those who don't know, is the first Hispanic female governor in the United States, and she is the first female governor of the state of New Mexico, where, by the way, New Mexico ranks 13th in the state in terms of the number of women representatives in the state legislature. So it's really, really terrific. After these three conversations, the speakers will join us in breakout rooms where we can continue the conversations and ask them some questions as well. And then at the end, we'll return from the breakouts, and 3 of you will receive commemorative gifts from today. So I urge you to stay on until the very, very end. Most of all, I want to thank you so much for being part of this event today. We are so grateful for your time and for your continued engagement. So with that, I'll toss it to Sylvie.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Laura. I'm Sylvie Legere. I am the co-founder of the Policy Circle, and it's really an honor to actually host this event and underline, and really remember the women that paved the way for us. So at this time, I really want to thank our network partners for supporting this event, and we are listing them in the chat. And in particular, the 19th, the Richard Lugar Excellence in Public Service Series, the Indiana Humanities, you, Laura, and She Said podcast. And I want to have a special thought to the She Factor. The founder, Heidi Ganal, is going through brain surgery as we speak, and I want to have a really special thought and prayer for her. So thank you to all of our partners, including also Women Leadership Lives, for promoting this event and making it such a success. So, we are proud of our sponsors because we have something in common. We all foster civic engagement. And this is a great moment because we are celebrating the women who came before us, and we are appreciating how far along we came. And we're bringing together women from all over the country, from Texas, from St. Louis, from San Diego, from Arizona, from South Carolina, Milwaukee, Lansing, Michigan, just really from everywhere. So I would love for you right now to actually engage in the chat and share how you engage in your community, and love to for you guys to share that and what you are doing. We have women who are engaged in working with women, human trafficking, engage in campaigns, engage in recruiting people to run for office, but also really engage in policymaking in their own communities, in parks, and access to healthcare, and helping distressed communities rise up and really provide great education to members of their communities. So with that, I'd like to first introduce Leah and Katie, who will take us back in time and dive into the story of women who came before us. As Laura said, Leah is a director of programs and community engagement with Indiana Humanities, which is a statewide nonprofit, and their mission is to encourage Hoosiers to think, read, and talk. And at Indiana Humanities, Leah has been focused on scaling up the programming, and you spearheaded the Indiana Suffrage 100 series of events that occurred this year. And also with Katie Glick, you are the key publisher of the Policy Circle Brief on the history of women's suffrage in Indiana. And you hosted a commemorative event in partnership with the Policy Circle at the Historical Society. Katie is a business development manager for Ice Miller LLP, and she is also a very new mother and an alum of the Lugar series in public service. And Katie, you were the catalyst for this event. You wanted to organize something with Leah, and we kind of took it and make it a really a substantive program aimed at walking us back through the time, and also getting us to reflect on how far along we came. So Katie is also, I want to highlight the co-chairs the Indiana State Leadership Council, and in that capacity spearheads several events that the Policy Circle there is hosting. So thank you again for being here today, and I'd like to pass it on to you, and Katie and Leah, take us back in time.
Thank you, Sylvie, and welcome everyone. I hope everyone has their cup of coffee or tea or wine or water with you. Leah and I have gotten to know each other over the past 2 years with our engagement and involvement on a statewide Centennial Suffrage Committee here in Indiana. She is my go-to history buff on all things suffrage, so we'll dive right into it. But before I start asking her questions, I want her to reference the history that she found out about the lily that Laura talked about. So Leah, why don't you go ahead and tell us about that, and then I'll get to our first question.
Yeah, so I'm so glad you brought up the lily and just the role of women as journalists and columnists to help raise awareness around suffrage is, I think, one of those things that's a big part of the story. It's really how did women keep momentum going for 70 years as they were figuring out ways to communicate. And so the lily was published in Peru, Indiana for a time. And what's funny about Peru, and I don't know if it's been studied, the connection here, was that eventually, it became the home of the League of Women Voters when it was first founded. One of the first national vice president of the League of Women Voters was also from Peru. So I think the lily was published in Peru in the 1850s and 60s. Then it moved to another state. But yeah, an amazing connection.
Great. So can you give us the general background on the suffrage movement and shed some light on some of the strategies that the suffragists used to promote the cause? Also tell us a little bit about the roles the women took within the strategy.
Yeah, so the Seneca Falls Convention, organized by Lucretia Mott and Elizabeth Cady Stanton in 1848 in upstate New York, was the first time that American women put forth an organized demand for the right to vote. They modeled their statement on the Declaration of Independence. So just like the founding fathers, laid out their claims against King George III, the Seneca Falls organizers laid out their claims against men. One of my favorite aspects of this statement is that women ask for more than just the right to vote. They ask for equal education and the ability to own property in their own names. And so from the beginning, you see the ways that suffragists saw their economic rights as linked to their political rights. And I think that's worth remembering. It's hard to summarize a great social movement of more than 70 years into a few minutes, but I think it's safe to say that until the 19th Amendment was passed in 1920, suffragists tried just about everything. Before the Civil War, they tried to work through Congress to achieve a federal law change, a constitutional amendment. And I'm proud that Indiana Congressman George Julian introduced the first women's suffrage amendment in 1868. Like many reform movements, there was a lot of momentum before the Civil War, but the war itself seriously disrupted the suffrage movement. Suffrage leaders threw their efforts into the war effort in the hopes that they could prove themselves worthy of citizenship. And you'll see that as a recurring theme here. And this is really where we see one of the first and perhaps the most important failings of the suffrage movement. Suffragists were divided on their support for the 15th Amendment, which guaranteed universal male suffrage, meaning that Black men who had been newly accepted as citizens after the passage of the 13th and 14th Amendments could vote. Some white women quite simply felt that Black men were not as worthy of the franchise as they were, and their reasons are racist, and there's really no other way to put that. Some others were thinking politically. They were thinking through kind of strategic questions like, would white male congressmen support women's suffrage if they linked their cause to Black male suffrage? Would white Southern leaders support women's suffrage if it included Black women? Or was it quote unquote safer politically to only pursue white women's suffrage? The national strategy trying to get an amendment to pass really stalled out after the war, the Civil War. So the next phase of the suffrage movement, which lasted until the 1910s, focused on state-based suffrage. And this is why I'm excited there's so many people here from around the country, because you Western states were the leaders in all of this. As new Western states were admitted, many allowed women to vote in state and local elections and allowed women to run for Congress and other offices. Eventually, suffragists in the East copied this strategy, pursuing partial franchise, and leaders in DC supported it in the hopes that this gradual approach would eventually lead to universal suffrage. And I think one of the tensions throughout the suffrage movement is a really American tension between federal and state, right? Like who has power, how do you achieve change? So that's one of those ongoing social studies teacher questions that I think about. By the early 1910s, though, tactics changed again. While the goal remained the same, Alice Paul and other suffragists adopted new, more militant tactics inspired by suffragists in England to put pressure on Congress to pass a suffrage amendment. They went on hunger strikes, they staged marches, and they famously became the first activists in American history to picket the White House. As this was going on, yet other suffragists continued to pursue both state-based advocacy, like here in Indiana, to try to get partial suffrage within the state, as well as persuade Congress to adopt a suffrage amendment. When World War I broke out, suffragists remember what had happened during the Civil War, and they said, okay, we will throw our effort into supporting this war, but that is contingent on us receiving the right to vote afterwards. One thing I just want to note here is that a lot of the suffrage history that we learned growing up was written by the suffragists themselves. It's one of their most endearing qualities, and I also find it quite poignant that as the first generation, women like Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, they knew they were not going to live to see the achievement of their goal in their lifetimes. So they wrote down their history so that they could try to inspire the next generation of women to pick up the cause and carry it forward. But this also means that the early suffrage history was written by middle class and upper class white women, and they wrote about women like themselves. So it doesn't mean there weren't Black women or immigrant women or working class women in the suffrage movement, but it does mean that their stories were overlooked and the reasons that they articulated for supporting suffrage weren't as well recorded as those of upper and middle class white women in that early period.
Awesome. Thanks, Leah. So what were some of the shortcomings of this movement?
Yeah, so like I said, there's no denying that race is a big issue and that many white suffragists, though I should not note that not all, Lucretia Mott basically ended her friendship and political alliance with Elizabeth Cady Stanton on this question. And there were many white women, especially Quakers, who never compromised on this issue. But many white women, they either explicitly worked to deny Black men and Black women the right to vote, or they tacitly endorsed this position by being willing to overlook Black suffrage in the pursuit of white women's suffrage. Unfortunately, I think that this is a central tension around race in US politics that continues to endure, but the fact is that many white suffragists simply felt it was good politics to deny Black people their full civil rights. It's also true that suffragists split over questions around whether immigrant men who naturalized as citizens should get the right to vote. So they thought, well, native-born women have been here longer than immigrant men. Shouldn't we be in line first? And when you read some of the arguments that suffragists are making in the early 1900s, they're knocking down immigrants left and right in order to further their own point. And again, this is something that continues to persist. The way we talk about immigrants in a political context is still an enduring question. I am very proud that in Indiana, probably just because Germans were very influential in Indiana, there were a lot of daughters of immigrants and immigrants themselves who were involved in the suffrage movement here. It's also interesting to note that a lot of suffragists were involved in the temperance or anti-alcohol movement. And largely this was because women felt they suffered acutely due to men's heavy drinking from domestic violence, but also from poverty when the men in their lives drank up their wages or weren't able to work due to drunkenness. So this turned a lot of men against suffrage. They thought, well, if these women get the right to vote, they're gonna vote in temperance. And this caused, in the Midwest, for instance, a lot of German immigrants who initially supported women's suffrage to turn against the movement because Germans were brewers and they didn't want to lose their livelihood. And I'm not going to lie, they weren't wrong. Women voters in Western states and in states with partial suffrage did vote in various temperance laws. So I find that source of tension interesting to think about as part of the politics.
Great. My last question for you is, how did they prepare women to step into public service?
So I love this question. One thing you have to realize when you think about the suffrage movement is that even though we now kind of take it as a foregone conclusion, you know, the arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards history, women didn't like wait around patiently, right? It was a deeply radical and norms shattering act. And that's one reason to think about why did it take more than 70 years, because it was so unthinkable and the opposition to suffrage was so persistent and intractable. So women learned how to get stuff done. They learned how to write letters. They organized in-person advocacy in state houses and in Congress, how to persuade the men in their lives to sign petitions, how to organize a national petition drive. In Indiana, the suffragists had offices inside the state house before they could vote. In DC, they bought a building next door to the US Capitol so that they were always there in the sightline of Congress. Over time, they adopted all kinds of techniques. They wrote columns in local newspapers and national columns in national newspapers. They organized rallies and hot air balloon leaflet drops and automobile tours and picket lines and marches. They were really big on spectacle. They knew that being unladylike would garner attention and possibly supporters. I was just learning about a suffrage speakers club here in Indiana that would send a speaker to give a 14-minute talk to any club meeting. And that reminds me a lot of kind of the policy circle, right? As these women are seeking out experts to come and give insight and information. And so suffragists were very canny about providing those experts. At a time when the women's role was to be a wife, a mother, and a daughter to mind the quote unquote separate sphere of home and family, the suffrage movement taught women how to take part in public civic life. And I think it's really cool that suffragists focused on many issues in addition to suffrage, like child labor reform, food and drug safety, public health, and lots of other causes. They learned how to learn about public issues and how to act on their passions. Women learned how to be persistent and organized, and they learned how to participate in the public sphere as speakers and political thinkers. It became clear, eventually that the nation was going to pass a suffrage amendment, so suffragists started organizing citizenship schools where women could come with their kids. They would provide free childcare, and they'd learn the do's and don'ts of financing elections and running for office and sponsoring legislation. So you won't be surprised then that the suffragists went on to found the League of Women Voters in 1920 to educate people on issues in a nonpartisan way and to encourage voting. It's also true that women got involved in political parties. They weren't always nonpartisan. They had ideas about issues and they pushed for those ideas. So I'm gonna wrap up here and I hope I'm not too over time. One of the fears that men had about women voters was that they would constitute a voting bloc. That is more than 50% of the population, they'd be unstoppable, right? That women would just get whatever they wanted. But as the work of Christina Woolbrecht at the University of Notre Dame and others have shown, that wasn't the case. Over the last century, women have tended to vote the way you think they would vote based on other factors, economic class, race, geography, and that gender is actually rarely determinative of how people vote. And that tells us something critical about women, that they think for themselves. They inform themselves of issues, they pay attention to the news, they cast their ballots, they speak out publicly, they support candidates, and they run for office based on their ideas, not on their gender.
So 2 quick takeaways I have here is that there are no women's issues. All issues are women's issues. And as I'm explaining to my 4-year-old about the suffrage movement, she looked at me and said, so there are superheroes? They saved us? And they did. And I think you captured that they are our heroes, and we can be the superheroes for the next generation, just like Elizabeth and others were. So thanks so much, Leah, and I'll give it back to Sylvie.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you so much, Leah and Katie, and thank you, Leah, for this synopsis of how far we've come, but also how things have not changed that much in the way women come together, the way women want to be informed, want to be able to speak in a very intelligent way about the issues, and not have their vote taken for granted. So thank you for sharing that. We're standing on the shoulders of incredible women who really spend their lives advocating for the right to cast a vote. And I feel like it's so important to kind of look back at that history and appreciate those lessons. We're dropping in the chat, and thank you everyone for sharing everything that you are doing in your community, from financial literacy, human trafficking, health, volunteering. It's just amazing. And I think through times, regardless of the titles that they have, women have been the motor of their community and stitched the fabric of their neighborhoods and really paved the way. So thank you everyone for sharing. Now our next vignette is about women in the media and women's voice and leadership in the media, and how the media actually represent women politicians. I think this is one of the areas that the suffragist movement really owned and controlled the media. And I think it's really great for us to think back as today, where are we at with women in the media? So it's my pleasure to introduce Dee Dee Bass, who is a principal at Bass Public Affairs. Dee Dee has decades of experience in corporate America, and as a media consultant for community organizations, business leaders, Maryland. Dee Dee and her sister Dina host a podcast. It's called Policy and Pound Cake. And they actually also hosted a commemorative event that's called Remembering the Ladies a few weeks ago, and I had the honor to participate. Amanda Becker is the Washington correspondent for the 19th. She covered US Congress, the White House, elections, and for more than a decade. And Amanda, you also worked on Reuters and the Washington Post, New Republic, Glamour magazine, and now you're with the 19th, and the 19th mission is really to express the voice of women by women. So Dee Dee and Amanda, please take it away.
Hello, Amanda. It is so nice to meet you virtually.
Hi, you too.
And I'm so glad to be here. So we're going to get right into it, Amanda, because I know that women in the media, it's evolved all over the years completely. And so share with us the evolution of women working in the media and how women are represented both within the media and in their coverage of the media. And taking it a step further, how are women covered based on their party affiliation?
Well, that's a lot. I'll try my best. So, obviously we have made strides. About half of newsrooms at this point are women. Mm-hmm. But where you see room for improvement is when you get into the upper echelons of leadership, whether that's being an editor, whether that is key, what we would call beats, which is what you cover, kind of the most high profile beats. You often see politics and national security. There's a lot of men covering those areas, whereas, the education beat might have more women. So my organization that I work for now, the Newsroom the 19th, was literally created by our CEO, Emily Ramshaw, who used to be at the Texas Tribune, because she was on parental leave during the 2016 election and was watching the coverage of what was the first a woman on a major party presidential ticket. And so for context, when she was looking at that coverage and thinking about kind of the spaces where there is room to grow in terms of equity, at that point, about 65% of all political stories were written by men. That had held pretty consistent from elections prior to that. 77% of guests on political news shows were men during the 2016 election. And even after that election, 73% of top editors at US newspapers are male, and 9 out of 10 of those are men. And so she just saw a space where 9 out of 10 of those, sorry, are white. I had already said men. So, you know, when you get to the top at newspapers, it's still by and large, overwhelmingly male, overwhelmingly white. Women make up more than half the electorate. I mean, we vote, we not only, there's more of us, we also vote at higher rates. And so she thought that political coverage just really isn't designed for us in mind, despite the fact that we're very civically engaged to a greater extent than our male counterparts. And that's true across other demographic groups and factors. And so we are aiming to kind of create a space for women to come for political news that appeals to them, that helps them make their voting decisions, that speaks to liberal women, that speaks to conservative women, that recognizes that all issues are women's issues. There aren't just 3 things that women care about. Of course, we care about healthcare. We also care about economics. I mean, women make the economic decisions in a lot of households, and there are more households headed by single women than there are single men. So, you know, we're really trying to be a space to have those conversations, to have that nuance. So, you know, we aren't in a situation where, for instance, I was covering the 2018 midterms and the influx of women into the House. It was mainly Democratic women that year. And editors, by and large male, were kind of struggling with how to cover that. You know, originally at the place I was working then, they had wanted to brand our content on that election the pink wave. And I said, you know, I don't wear pink. Like, why would we call that the pink wave? Like, just because, you know, this isn't like a breast cancer march. These are women who've been elected to Congress. When they were, you know, talking about kind of what came next, and I'd written about all these amazing women kind of with national security backgrounds who had been elected to the House. They'd been in the CIA, they'd been in the FBI, they'd been analysts at kind of the highest levels of our government. And it was like, well, how are they gonna change things, you know? And I was like, well, they're going to be on the National Security Committee. They're not going to all of a sudden go to the, you know, Education Committee in the Senate or the House just because they're a woman and you think that is a woman's issue. They're going to be working on the issues they've always worked on their entire career. So while we have made strides in the media, there's quite a bit of room still for improvement, in my opinion.
Got it. So what does the representation look like when it comes to op-eds and letters to the editor?
So I was looking for some solid stats on op-eds, and I was having trouble finding one. I do know that 2 Februaries ago, the New York Times underwent a project. Someone pointed out to them that they did not think that women's voices were represented on their op-ed page. And so they underwent a year-long effort to fix that. And so as of this February, the tally was about 43% women, 57% men. And it's kind of frozen there. And they don't know how to improve it beyond that. I do know that I know that, for example, I was just talking to someone from Joe Biden's presidential campaign. One of the things they're incorporating into their women's events are trainings for women who are interested in how to get op-eds placed, how to write them, who to pitch them to, that sort of thing. Because, you know, in these traditionally male-dominated areas of the media, which is kind of foreign policy, national security, politics, and opinion, it is still a majority man's world right now.
So how can women influence the media?
I would say, you know, if the policy circle wanted to do a training or something like that about getting op-eds placed, that would be a really great place to start. I think that once women are given the tools and the path is laid out about how to do something, it becomes a lot easier to get it done. And I think that this is something that women are going to have to take upon themselves. I mean, you can rely on newspaper editors and to field incoming pitches as much as you want, but I think the best, probably fastest way to change that dynamic would to just be to get more women in the pipeline writing, more women offering their opinions, their expertise, and, you know, having newsrooms such as ours. We don't take op-eds, but, you know, we are over 90% female in our newsroom. So there is no male-dominated beat at the 19th. You know, we are covering economics, we are covering politics, we are covering healthcare and everything in between. So I really think that, unfortunately, women are going to have to take this upon themselves to kind of get out there and get seen and get in front of the people that we need to get in front of.
Wow. Well, Amanda, thank you so much. And I think one of my, or two of my takeaways is that the Policy Circle will probably have a brief coming out about women writing op-eds. So I'm looking forward to that coming really, really soon. And women just continuing to, like you said, take charge and be out front as much as we can. So thank you so much. Really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dee Dee and Amanda. Thank you so much. You know, I want to say, to change the narrative, I know that every time I look at the paper, I look at the number of, I kind of scan through the names and see how many men and women there are who wrote letters to the editors. And I know in the Wall Street Journal, overwhelmingly, men publish letters. So I invite everyone to actually garner the courage to send your opinion. And we have, for Policy Circle leaders and Policy Circle members, we actually did organize some training on how to interact with the media. And also, you know, we're dropping in the chat a link to some virtual resources that you could use. And we have great templates that Nicole Klein developed to get you started on writing a letter to the editor and writing an op-ed. But I think this is definitely something that circles and local resources can really help develop the skills and also just the pathways to publish op-eds. So thank you so much for having this focus on the media. I think it's important. The media influences everything and everyone, so it's good to think about it and really look at it. And, you know, 100 years ago, women paved the way for all of us to engage fully in the election process. One of the ways to engage is, of course, going to the ballot, voting, but it's also to work as an election poll, because women before us wanted fair election, fair representation. And today, this election, more than ever, because of the pandemic, our election committees in our states really need poll workers. So I invite everyone to actually discuss election integrity, look at the brief that the Policy Circle has on that, and also visit some of the resources we'll put in the chat to sign up as a poll worker. And I know that we hosted a segment on what it means to be a poll worker, and how, to quote a Policy Circle leader, it's a real act of love for your community to spend a day ensuring fair elections. So I invite you to do that. Another way, of course, to be involved in the election process, to work on a campaign, and of course, to be a candidate. So I'm thrilled now to actually talk about policy in action, and with former Governor Susana Martinez, former governor of New Mexico. And I'll give a quick, you know, bio of Susana Martinez. She became New Mexico's first female governor and the first Hispanic female governor in the history of the United States. So she marked history. And Governor Martinez took office in 2010 when New Mexico was facing largest budget deficit in the state history, corruption, chronically underperforming schools, and an economy that was really dependent on federal funding. And she confronted those issues. She decided to become governor in that time, confronted these issues and turned a large budget deficit into a surplus, restored confidence in the state government, and enact bold education reform that increased achievement of students across the states. So the governor's accomplishments are numerous, and her experience underscores really the significant strides that women have made at all levels in the political arena. And the governor never backs down for tough issues. So welcome, Governor Martinez. Thank you so much for joining us today. You know, you started as a prosecutor, and then you ran for district attorney. And I'm curious, what inspired you to actually run for governor? You right off the bat, so.
Well, it wasn't really right off the bat. I'm actually have been involved in politics for a very long time, whether it was with my school. I had two amazing teachers in the freshman year who actually gathered a bunch of young girls, and we met with them about our goals. Where do we want to be in 5 years? Where do we want to be in 10 years? And of course, I was no different than most teenagers. All I wanted to know what dress I was going to wear to the homecoming game, and did I have a date? And so they got us to thinking further beyond that. And so when I was able to think about, well, what did I want to do once I left high school? Was I definitively I was going to college? That was something that was put and talked about by my parents in our home all the time. My brother and myself went to college and graduated, and then I'm the only one that went on to law school. However, those two women, those two teachers, started to make me think beyond in politics. I always knew I wanted to be in politics, but I thought I would be maybe a mayor or a city councilwoman. And they then said to me, why are you stopping there? And they made me think about it. And I said, well, I don't know. Maybe it's because I don't have the experience of seeing other female mayors beyond that, and I just didn't have that experience in the realm of my community, my neighborhood, a lot of dropouts within my neighborhood. It was a tough place sometimes to be. And so I couldn't see the world beyond that. And they made us look at the world beyond just our little neighborhood and our little community. And so I said, well, I see senators all the time debating on TV. And I love to hear the debate back and forth. Of course, they were mostly men. And I loved how they would debate issues back and forth. And when I was 16 years old, my father made me get involved in a female who was running in El Paso, Texas. She was running for the county judge, which is sort of a county manager, but it was an elected position. And so I went, and I started stuffing envelopes and walking blocks and knocking on doors and distributing all the material for this amazing woman that was running for office in El Paso, and I was just 16. Of course, I got involved in politics in my school. High school, ran for student body president, became student body president. In law school, I became the second year class president. And then I ran for district attorney after having been an assistant for 6 years. And when I ran for district attorney, I was of a party that was outnumbered 3-1. So I said that wrong. I was of a party where the other party outnumbered my party 3-1. And so it was going to be challenging. But I was committed to the public service I'd already been doing for 6 years for the kids, especially because I specialized in very difficult cases, the sexual abuse of children, the physical abuse, homicide of children, adult rape. I mean, very, very difficult cases. And I wanted to be able to do it with some really good policies to be implemented. And so I ran for office. I won my first race with a 60% margin. And then I went on to get reelected 3 subsequent times. When I turned 50, it was either the Corvette or I was going to plunge into something that was one of my dreams, which was going to be run for office. And so I decided to run for office because public service means a great deal to me. And so I said, I'm running for office, and these are the reasons I'm running for office. I think policy is so important. And I didn't ever mention that I was a woman or a woman of color, because I was hoping that that was obvious and that I didn't have to put that out there as a policy or an issue or a reason to vote for me, but that it was the policies I was bringing forward, my ideas and the promises that I was going to make to people as I ran for office. And so I plunged in, stepped back and went, now what? What do I do? How do I raise money? How do I build coalitions? How do I speak to people all over this very large state, very rural state? And at the time, I had a 3% name ID in the entire state. And when I got elected in 2010, I had a 97% name ID and won the election again, belonging to a party that was not expected to win for governor. And it was about 2 weeks before when the election took place that I actually realized that I would become the first female Hispanic governor in the country. It just never entered my mind because I wasn't doing it for those reasons. But I thought there was a lot to be said and done for our great state of New Mexico. And so that is why I chose to become a part of the election process in the hopes that my ideas would bring people together and certainly bring policies that meant a whole lot to everyone, regardless of party and regardless of gender.
Yeah, thank you for your story is so inspiring, and also how young you start, right? So it's our responsibility, I think, to inspire young women to consider running for office, and also not to stop ourselves. I mean, you were 50, that there's many chapters. As women, our life is composed of many chapters. You mentioned something about building coalition, and one thing with the policy circle is that we become informed about the issues, so we can find our focus and really engage with the constituency using the briefs that are fact-based, and we can engage in real conversation. The other piece is, as we become able to engage on any kind of issues, we can start to interact with people and we can start to build coalitions. Tell us a little bit about, how you build a network of support across the state, because that is what is key. That was the story of the suffrage movement. It was a network of women, and it's the story of all women who are successful in politics and in being influencers in policy. So tell us a little bit about how you've developed this network and how you're maintaining it today, now that you're out of office.
Well, like I said, when I first announced to run for office, I'd already run for office 4 different times to be the elected district attorney. Very different from a statewide race, but I didn't know that. When you are selling tickets for events to raise money, to get the media out there to get to know you in your own county, it's very different when you're selling tickets for $25. It's very different when you're running for a statewide race. And it is one of the top, largest states in the country, land mass wise. And how was I going to get around to making sure I had a good team, a really good team who understood politics, messaging my message, messaging what I had in mind, but also at the same time, I'm learning. I was a prosecutor for 25 years, elected DA and an assistant DA. So for 25 years, that's what I did. But I also was very involved in education because I knew many of the people that were being sent to, whether they sent to become a part of the criminal justice system, had a lot of reading skill issues and a lot of life skill issues. And so we got involved in that because I wanted them out of the criminal justice system and not coming into our system. So we delved into that. But building coalitions meant I had to work really hard at getting out there and meeting people eye to eye. I don't know how they're doing it this year with the COVID and not having that kind of access, but it meant the world to me to speak to people and speak the truth. I'm not gonna say whatever I need to say in one part of my state to get their support and their vote, and then go to another part of the state and be able to say something totally different because I know that's what they wanna hear in order to get that vote. But I also knew I had to go to places that made most people of my party very uncomfortable because it was a majority of the different party. I went to every part of the state. I didn't care if they were Democrats or Republicans. I went there, I spoke to them in English, I spoke to them in Spanish, and I gave them my ideas, and I told them what I was gonna fight for them and their families, in the hopes that life would be better and more prosperous for them and their children, and opportunities. And I think that was one of the things that helped me building coalitions in places, especially where it wasn't expected, because I showed up. And that's one of the first things you have to do when you're an elected official or running for office, is show up. And then be honest. And your policies have to be data driven. As a prosecutor, I had to seek the truth and justice in each and every case. And so the truth to me meant everything. Data meant everything. And I dealt with many, many experts. And the data from those experts helped me then figure out what I was going to do with every single issue in policy. And I mean, as governor, I can't be all things to all people. I'm not the expert in everything. But you surround yourself with really good folks. And that makes an enormous difference as to the successes that are going to follow.
Well, thank you for sharing. It's kind of interesting because, you know, it sounds like you became really informed about the issues and you developed your own compass of what it is that you stood for. What are the points on this compass that drove you to represent, to seek people's vote and to represent people from across your state. And having that compass is really key, is the key to the success of being an effective and authentic politician. And in a way, you know, that it's music to my ear to hear you say facts and data, because I started the policy circle on that premise that we all want to just base our reviews, and we want to be able to bridge what we care about with the impact of public policy in our lives. And we need to understand what has been done before, what works, where are really the voids, and decide find our focus. So I think, you know, you would be a great champion for the policy circle in New Mexico, because that's what we're all about. So, you know, I know that right now, I think I have, I'm going to check with, you know, one thing. I just have like one last question for you. Nevada, as Laura said, ranks 11th as the number of women in the legislature, with 36% of the state legislature with women. What do you think, and maybe really briefly, what do you attribute this women's engagement in state politics? Did it come from you because you were there as a governor? Tell us a little bit about that, and then we will kind of continue with the second part of our program.
Yes. I certainly understand that. I mean, I was not elected until 2010, took office in 2011. And so I may be paving a path for younger individuals, or even middle, you know, women that are in my community now that may say, you know what, that is possible to run in the legislature. And that is something I can do. One of the things I keep telling other women is saying, if you ran and you lost, keep running. It doesn't mean that that is your only opportunity to take office. If you have great ideas, it just needs to be a different way of maybe getting there. And so I really believe that the only way I was able to get there is that building coalitions of ideas. And I think people are mostly tired of all the rhetoric and all the blah, blah that takes place sometimes. They want facts. They want to know what's real. They don't want to know what is, you know, more favorable to that party or this party. Give me the facts and let me decide how I vote. And it can be a ballot that causes you to cross vote from one party to another because of the people and their ideas and what they bring to my home and to my children and to my opportunities, and not something that is just rhetoric and then you forget what you've said and promised to the world, what you've said and promised to your community or to your next door neighbor.
So thank you. Well, I mean, this has been such an enriching conversation, inspiring, and looking at the chat here, you know, everyone appreciated your remarks. Thank you so much for joining us. And, you know, as we transition, I invite everyone to share in the chat the highlights of, for you, of the conversations that we had today. And we have so many amazing women on this call that we thought it would be great if we broke out into smaller groups where we can meet each other and continue the discussions with some of our speakers. So I'm going to thank you, everyone, for joining us today and making this program possible. As you know, the Policy Circle is a nonprofit grassroots organization, and to support our mission, programming like this one, and build your own leadership skill, we really invite you to kind of click on the link that's shared in the chat here to invest in different ways. Also, you know, save the date. September 9th, we have our next program in this election series, and it's going to be at noon also, and it will be on inspiring civic engagement in others with Kim Whaley. She's the author of a book, highly recommend, What You Need to Know About Voting and Why. So, you know, that's our next program. Save the date, you'll be receiving notification. And so again, I want to raise our mug for the women who came before us, the women that were standing on their shoulders. And I'd love for everyone to share what this program will inspire them to do, and stay in touch. And I look forward to welcoming you to the next one. So thank you everyone for joining today.